Thank you for coming today to this session on preparing first-year students for success. Today's webinar will be recorded and it will be sent out after today's session by email. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat window and I will address them during the session, or you can save them for the question and answer period at the end of the webinar. And I'll just put a little note in there in the chat. And today's webinar is brought to you by Human eSources. Human eSources is a worldwide leader in the development and provision of online assessments, student success, and personal development programs. We also have a free resume service that you can learn more about at humanesources.com. And we're so pleased today to have Dr. Thomas E. Rojo Aubrey here today to share how we can help first-year students. Dr. Aubrey is the Director of Behavioral Health Sciences, Faculty Chair for Counseling and Behavioral Science Division, and Professor at South Mountain Community College in Arizona, as well as First-Year Coordinator. Dr. Aubrey has his doctorate in behavioral health and is working on a second doctorate in cognitive psychology. Dr. Aubrey also serves on the Psychology Counseling Advisory Board for Grand Canyon University and the Advisory Board for Arizona Trauma Institute and the Governing Board for the National Institute for Behavioral Medicine. He's the author of several textbooks, including The Science of College Success, The Resilient Professional, The Resilient Learner, The Science of Trauma and Recovery. And I'd like to welcome Thomas to today's call. And today's webinar, I will also say, is based on some of the information that you will find in the Science of College Success. And the particular chapter that this information is borrows from is creating inner balance with self-regulation.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you, Tamara, for having me today. So I like to start today's presentation with a riddle and just take a second and imagine that you're in a rowboat, but the rowboat's sinking. And as you're looking as far as you can see, you see no land in sight. But the problem is that there's hungry sharks surrounding your boat. Now remember, the boat is sinking. Take a second and think about what would you do? And you can go ahead and type that into the chat, and Tamara go ahead and mention some of your responses. But what would you do? And maybe you're like the guy in the boat with the question mark. I have no clue what I would do.
I think that's most of us. Oh, someone says jump in.
Jump in. Well, there's a brave soul there.
Yes.
That's the first. Jump in, just give up and like, okay, I surrender. Well, I'm not going to give you the answer just yet. Continue pondering on that question, and then we'll get to the answer towards the end of the presentation. But the fact is, and hopefully I didn't stress you out with that riddle, but the fact is that our students are stressed out. And a lot of them are experiencing anxiety. And we take a look at the research, some of the latest research, and this is post-COVID. This is the latest research. 65% reported feeling stressed all of the time or often. Now think about that. 65% of your students, per se, are saying all the time or often, most of the time, I'm feeling stressed out. And then 37% of students are reporting moderate to severe anxiety. Now, in the chat, what type of stressors are your students experiencing, whether it's work-related, relationship-related, or other areas of their life? Go ahead and type that into the chat feature.
All of it.
All of it.
Answer. Yeah.
Yeah, probably just a plethora of experiences that they're going through, maybe work. I just lost my job, maybe in their relationships, It's I just broke up with my girlfriend. Other areas of their life. Maybe they're stressed out with you as the instructor or as the advisor. So whatever the stressors are they're experiencing, or whatever the anxieties are, maybe they're in the nursing program and they're stressed out about the HESI exam. So whatever it may be, your students are experiencing an array of stress, and we have to recognize that. And what I'd like to just explore is what's happening in the brain as your students are experiencing this stress. Now, remember, the research just showed that most of the time, they're experiencing this stress. So that means they're bringing it into the classroom too. So what I'd like to do is, and this is how I help my students understand what happens in the brain when they bring their stressors into the classroom. So what I do is I ask my students, just imagine for a second, just like I asked you to imagine about the shark scenario, I ask students, just imagine if I were to bring a tiger into the classroom. And a tiger starts to roam around the classroom, and then it's roaming, it's roaring. Now, I then ask my students, how many of you, let's say for as an example, if we were to take a final quiz at the end of the class, maybe on the elements of the periodic table, how many of you after a lecture about the elements would be prepared to take that exam as that tiger, as you're learning, as that tiger is roaming around the classroom roaring and maybe even sniffing you? And of course, occasionally I get a student that just witty says, I can do it. I'll turn to the student and I say, well, your survival skills suck. But the reality is that our bodies are not built like that. That's not what happens in the brain, and that's not what happens in our physiology. And so let's take a look at what happens. Let's take a look at what happens in the body. And we know this. If we're in a situation where our life is in threat, digestion, immune system, they start to slow down, uh, almost come to a halt, and it starts to divert energy. Even blood flows away from the stomach. I don't need to digest. Let's say, for example, if I ate a steak right before coming into class, I don't need to digest that steak right now because there's something more urgent right now. My life's potentially in danger. And so I need to focus on that. So it sends blood to the extremities. It sends blood to my legs so I can receive glucose to run away from this tiger, or maybe to my arms to fight this tiger. Adrenaline starts to kick up. The same thing and something similar happens in the brain. So the activity that we need in the classroom, maybe to memorize, to use critical thinking, abstract thinking, um, reflective thinking. If you're teaching maybe first year experiences and talking about growth and fixed mindset, and they need to reflect on self. Well, that requires the higher parts of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. But when that tiger's in the room, activity in that areas of the brain, the neocortex, the activity starts to divert to the subcortical regions of the brain. Now they're in fight response in the limbic system and the emotional part of the brain. So less activity in that area of the brain because it's not really important. It doesn't really matter if I memorize this if this tiger eats me. So their body naturally, and it's a normal response and it's a survival response. What's more important at this moment right now? What's more important is not memorizing or learning when I'm learning right now. I'm in flight or fight mode, and I need to survive. Now, granted, I tell my students, no instructor would bring a tiger, and I hope none of you would bring a tiger into the classroom. But this tiger is figurative. This tiger represents all the stressors that your students bring into your classroom, or maybe into your appointment if you're an advisor. So it's that breakup with their boyfriend or girlfriend. Now they're in a stress response mode. They don't have access or full access to that higher part of the brain to learn, to reflect, to use critical thinking to make wise decisions. And instead, they're in their limbic system area of the brain. And then there's sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic instead of the parasympathetic nervous system in that flight or fight response. And so just think about why it's hard for students to stay focused in class. And that it's interesting because many times, even myself as the chair for the counseling division, I get many instructors, they're saying, no, the student's just not ready. They're not listening in class. And the question, the reflective is, why aren't they listening? Why is it that they can't focus in class? Is it possible because of the stressors they bring into the classroom? And how can you as an instructor or you as an advisor or you as an educator help those students then regain balance in their nervous system to activate their parasympathetic nervous system so they can learn within the classroom, to regain access to that higher part of the brain? So those are questions that maybe as educators we really never thought about. Focus is, well, my job is just to teach math. But how effective will your skills of teaching math be if we can't first help our students regulate and gain access to that part of the brain? So to explore that, let's go into the root cause of stress. And this is something that I do with my students in class, and I encourage you to do it in your class to help them understand what's the root cause of stress. Because the fact is, as an instructor, for you to deal with their financial problems, to deal with their relational problems, well, that's probably beyond our scope of competence. And we probably don't have the time to address every single stressor that our students are dealing with. However, we can deal with the root cause of stress, but we have to first understand that root cause of stress. And so if you have the opportunity, I'd like to hear your feedback. Put yourself in your students' shoes as I'm doing this exercise. And usually what I do is I have students come up to the board and I ask, is your life stressful? And I have this up on the board. I say, circle the area of your life that's the most stressful. Is school the most stressful area in your life? How about work, relationships, or other areas in your life that you can think about? And I'll have them come about up to the board and circle which one area is the most stressful area of their life. Or if there's another, then write it on the board. So think about any of your particular students or all of your students. What area is the most stressful for them? And what I do is the next exercise, which I have on the board, is let's gonna go ahead and do a brainstorm. We're gonna explore the causes and the effects. The fact that you have these stressors in your life, we're gonna take a look at what are the causes of of your stressors, and then what are the effects of having those stressors in your life. And so then I'll have them come up to the board and I have them write things that are that cause your stress under the causes. And so go ahead and type out things that you believe your students would write up on the board. And I know I get a lot of students they'll say, in your class, you have give too much homework. So that's the cause of my stress. But what are some of the causes that you think your students are experiencing?
We have homework, family, kids, bills, juggling everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's about what the answers, the responses I get. Now, keeping those causes of their stressors that these students are giving you, the next the next exercise is to have them come up to the board again and write a list of negative effects that these stressors have in your life. The fact that you have all these tasks in your life, homework, the fact that you have, parents that you believe stress you out, your teacher stressing you out, giving you homework assignments, work, your boss, the fact that you have all these things in your life, what are the effects that it's causing in your life? Maybe difficulty sleeping. They may experience somatic issues such as headaches or relational problems. So, what are the things that you believe your students are experiencing or they may admit to experiencing by having these stressors in their life? And go ahead and type that into the chat feature. And if it's challenging to put yourself in your student's shoes, maybe think of your life. What are some of the stressors? What are the cause of stressors in your life? And as a result of having those stressors in your life, what are the effects?
We have an answer of anxiety comes out in many different ways, including
Mm,
panic attacks. Um,
mm,
I often witness meltdowns.
mm. Yeah. And so when I do this exercise, this is just a broad oversight of things that students report when I do this. They say multiple demands, time constraints, workload, too much homework, financial problems, negativity in the family, incompetence of others, pain and suffering. A lot of times from some of my older students, we'll talk about that. And what are the effects of a result of having these so-called causes in your life? And they'll say, they're irritable, they're angry, they have sleeping problems, there's fatigue, there's the relational problems, there's compulsive behaviors. They don't say compulsive behaviors. I'm just wrapping it and putting it into a category of what they describe when they write on the board. Somatic issues. I never had a student that actually said somatic issues. Unless I do this in my behavioral sciences courses, then I'll have students that have that higher vocabulary and they'll say somatic issues. It's just headaches and gastrointestinal issues, but bad attitude, substance abuse. And so these may be, if you think about it, some of the things that your students are experiencing. And then I'll have my students sit down and I go to the next slide. And I said that, the next slide is very important. And hear what I'm saying, but be open to what I'm about to say. You might not like what I'm about to say, but we're going to explore it in a bit. And I say, now take a look at all these causes that you have written down on the board. And maybe some had written down on a piece of paper. And I tell them, these are not the causes of your stress. Now, that might be hard to hear. These are not the causes of your stress. And I say, as long as you continue believing that these are the causes of your stress, you're going to continue having these effects. You're going to continue having sleeping problems. You're going to continue having fatigue. You're going to continue having relational problems, right? You can't expect to do the same thing and have different results. You're going to continue having the same results. So then what I do is then I say, I tell my students that leaves me in a position where now I have to prove to you that these are not the causes of your stress. And then I have to show you what are the true causes of your stress. And for that, we have a gamut of exercises that we do in generally in the classroom. And this is one of the exercises that we do. And I call this the stress reduction with mindfulness-based CBT. But it'll come to a realization to what is the true causes of my stress, and it gives them more of an internal locus of control. I do have control over all these external factors that are happening in my life because in as it stands right now, I'm relinquishing my control. I'm saying everything, I'm going to have stress in my life and I have no control of my life because these things are going to still continue happening in my life. If I say the stressor in my life is my wife, well, I have either two options, find a new wife or deal with the stress or change my relationship, right? Or maybe change how I see things in the relationship. And so let's explore that further. Here's an exercise, and I'd like each of you to be as honest as possible as I ask you this, and think about how your students would respond to this question. Are you 100%? I'm not saying 99%, I'm not saying 50%, I'm saying, are you 100% safe right now? Now, please feel free to type in, and if there's some research and statistic professors here, you're going to love this. You might give me some in-depth responses to, are you 100% safe right now?
We have an answer of I am, but I'm sure there would be different opinions. And there's a yes. I'll be a cynic and I'll say no.
Well,
Technically,
what do you think?
yes.
Well, I got a good audience here. What do you think your students would say? And I'm not just saying students because I do this with police officers. Because I train police officers in resilience, and rarely do I ever get a police officer, and these are professionals who ever say, "Yes, I'm 100% safe right now." What do you think your students will say?
I think that many would say yes, but not that they are truly safe.
Oh, okay. Well, you have some great students because I haven't had a student yet who has said I'm 100% safe. In the most part, when I do this exercise, and I've done this exercise for over 10 years, they'll say, no, I'm not 100% safe. There's no way of guaranteeing my safety. And so what I do is I ask my students we're going to take a second and we're going to do a mindfulness exercise. And I'm going to ask you to lose your mind and come to your senses. Now that's from the words of Fritz Perls, Gestalt therapy. So we're going to lose your mind and come to your senses and focus more on coming to your senses. And when I say losing your mind, it's just instead of focusing on what could happen, what has happened, you're focusing in the present moment and you're coming to your senses, experiencing your environment with your five senses. Or you can say six if you want to include perception and others. But the exercise goes as follows. Take a second in 10 seconds and mindfully experience the room you're in without any judgment. Cut yourself off from any past learning, future risk as you're observing an object. Don't think about what could happen, the future or the past. Just see the room as it truly is in the moment. And try to identify something in the room that's dangerous. Now, when I do this exercise, and I encourage you to do this exercise, and I'm assuming with the response, you're going to be surprised by the responses that your students have, is that they'll come up with all kinds of creative ideas of how they're dangerous in the moment. I had one student who looked at the projector and said, that's potentially dangerous. How so? It could fall on you. It could fall on me. And what I'll do is I'll go under the projector, stand under the projector, and I say, is the projector falling right now? No. Then I'm 100% safe right now. But it could fall. Yes, it could. I'm not saying it couldn't. But is it happening right now in this moment? Because my question was, are you safe right now? So, I've done this exercise virtually. I had one student who said, well, there's a pair of scissors there. That's dangerous. How so? I'd say, well, I can stab myself with that. I was like, but are you picking up the scissors and are you stabbing yourself right now? No. So those scissors are not dangerous. We could have thoughts. Someone could have thoughts of punching someone, but are we doing it? Right. And if that were the case, I worked crisis mobile team for about 5 years. I would be petitioning and having everybody committed because we all have those thoughts. But are we following through with those thoughts? Are we in danger right now? And I had one student, interestingly, said that the flag in the classroom is dangerous. And I asked, how so? Someone can grab it and grab that flag and just jab me through the heart with it. And I'm thinking, what are my students watching on YouTube? Stop watching those things. But the fact is, nobody is grabbing the flag and no one's charging towards them with trying to spear them with the flag. So right now, and when I do this with police officers, I tell police officers, I understand there's always that anxiety to prepare yourself for what could happen, because that gets you back home. But your training and your nervous system naturally will react. If there isn't danger, you don't have to think about, okay, sympathetic nervous system, activate. go into flight or flight. It will occur automatically. You don't even have to train that. What we do have to train ourselves is to relax in the moment and realize in this moment, I'm 100% safe because otherwise our health starts to deteriorate. And it's hard for us, if we go back to students, to learn in the classroom if we're constantly thinking about all the stressors that we're experiencing that is outside of the door, that's not in the classroom in that moment. So I love this quote because this is basically what we're observing. We see things not as they are, but as we are. It's all of our past learned experiences as those YouTube, clips that our students are watching. It's their past learning experience, their trauma, everything that they've experienced. Then they start to perceive a reality that's not the true reality in this moment. And so basically, in the words of Pogo, we have met the enemy, and the enemy really is us. Now, let's go back to the riddle that I gave you earlier. You're in a rowing boat that's sinking, no land in sight, surrounded by hungry sharks. What will you do? Given what we just learned, what would you do? You're imagining that you're in a rowing boat. No, no land in sight, surrounded by hungry sharks. What would you do? Any thoughts? The
Someone who
answer,
asked if they have a phone.
the answer is stop imagining. I did say imagine. That's as simple as that. Stop imagining. And many times, and I'm not trying to minimize the stress that you're experiencing, the stress that your students are experiencing, but right now in this moment, I'm not experiencing that stress. It's an imagined stressor. So the fact that that projector could fall on me is an imagined stressor. The fact that I could fail my exam, I don't know yet. It's an imagined stressor. Instead of focusing on, I need to prepare myself and be as prepared as I can for the exam, I'm imagining myself failing that HESI exam. So I'm bringing and inducing anxiety and stressor that's not real in the moment. Now that's easier said than done. And we have to admit that. But part of the curriculum that was developed for this first year experience is training. It's not something, and I'm not going to say right now, after this workshop, you're going to be able to be present in the moment and not worry about anything in the future or even ponder on some of the experiences that you've gone through, painful experiences of the past. And something that is going to take and require a lot of training for your students to rewire the brain to look at things from a different perspective. But the curriculum that we've created does that through entire, if you have a 10-week semester, a 7-week semester, to help your students see things from a different perspective and give them the best chances for success, not just in school, but in life in general. Now, think about this. Every single study skill that we teach it from a mindfulness perspective. How do we apply the principles of mindfulness embed that within the study skill so that they can learn that so it can become a second habit? Now, think about this from a mindfulness perspective, and this is good for you as educators, or if you work in another uh, type of career setting. Notice what it says here, the feelings of stress related to being busy. Think about how stressful you felt by being busy. You have a lot of tasks ahead of you. There's a lot to do, and you're feeling stressed. Too many tasks, too little time. Is the result of thinking of what you're not doing at the moment. Now, if you really think about that's very profound. Let's take, for example, your email, and I'll have a self-disclosure here. I have about 1,400 emails in my inbox right now. Now, if I think about those 1,400 emails, too much task, too little time. I'm going to stress myself out. But if I focus just on one email at a time, this one email, that's all I need to do. Not worried about the 1,399 more emails. I'm just focused on this one email. Boom, type it out, write it out. Boom, done. Let me focus on the next email. Boom, type it out, write it done. Hey, don't have enough time to get to the other ones. I'll get to it tomorrow. That's probably why I have 1,400 emails, right? But if I focus on one email at a time and not worry about the other emails, I'm no longer stressed. I've just eliminated my stress. And so that's how profound this is. If I worry about what I have to do tomorrow, the next day, I'm going to stress myself out. But if I focus on the moment and I keep myself present in what I'm doing in this moment, and that's it, then I reduce the amounts of stress in my life. And can we help students see that? And that really is a task that I believe educators have to help their students. Now, here's the $1 million question. Will it really help them to teach them to do that? Well, let's take a class. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, that your students are taking a resiliency class, or let's go to an FYE first year experience class. And let's say they're taking a 1 credit course, a 1 credit FYE course. And you're an amazing instructor, but you just want to teach them everything. So you load your class with assignments and journals because you just want them to finish your class knowing everything they need to know in this 1 credit course for them to become successful throughout their 4 year experience, to then achieve persistence and completion towards their bachelor's degree. So we have two students that enroll in your class. One student's a naysayer. They get into your class, and the first thing they look at is your syllabus, and they're complaining. I can't, this is ridiculous. I took this 1 credit course because I thought it was going to be an easy course. And there's just a massive amounts of homework assignments, massive amounts of reading. Um, it's ridiculous. The instructor obviously doesn't have a life, and that's why he or she is giving me these amounts of homework because he or she doesn't believe I have a life. They start complaining to other students. Now, if I were to measure throughout the entire duration of this course the levels of cortisol or stress hormones in that student's blood, what do you think the levels would be? High or low? Well, rhetorical question, you probably know the answer. It would be high. What would be the ratio of positive to negative emotions that they're experiencing if they continue throughout the course as naysayer? I don't see this, or it may even be, I don't even see why there's reason for me. I mean, I know how to manage my time. Why am I learning how to manage my time? So what's the ratio of positive to negative emotions that they're experiencing? Well, obviously more negative emotions. And when we look at, that's not to say we're minimizing the importance of negative emotions. Negative emotions are important. But when you look into positive psychology, the work of Dr. Martin Seligman and others show that we have to have a higher ratio of positive emotions versus negative emotions to improve our health. If it flips around, we have a higher ratio of negative emotions to positive emotions, we're going to have more levels of cortisol in the body. You're going to have experience more health complications. Now, important question, this is related to us as educators. How likely would that student succeed in their class? What's the likelihood of them dropping out before completion? Now, let's go to another scenario. We have a different student who perceives things something differently. Um, It's like this. They perceive it as they go to Chipotle and they pay for a bowl and they get two bowls, one free. Well, that's how they see your class. I'm only paying for one credit, and yet I'm getting all the knowledge of a 3 credit course. I know that's that's probably not how your students see things, but that's what we're talking about is changing their perception of reality. But let's take that student who does see things from that perspective. When we measure their cortisol levels, will it be high or low? It's going to be low, right? Ratio of positive to negative emotions, more positive emotions. And the negative emotions become diluted, right? Because now you have a large pool of positive emotions. So it doesn't have an adverse effect on our health. Are they more likely to succeed in your class? They're more likely to persist and complete in your class. All because of a change in perception. And so this goes back to answering the question, is this really important to teach? Well, if we don't teach that, if we don't teach them how to perceive things from a different perspective, to be present in the moment, then they're going against the grain. And it becomes very challenging for them, if not impossible, for some to then persist in completing within your classroom. And we've seen, at least in the curriculum that we've embedded this, we've seen an increase from 40% completion, course completion rate to 92% course completion rate. Just by doing some of these activities and exercise that help students see things from a different perspective. Now we're talking, like, once again, I said, one single workshop is not going to do it because we're talking about rewiring the brain to see things differently. Let me give you one more exercise. I'm looking at time, and it looks like I'm pretty good at time, and I'm towards the end. So one more exercise that I give my students to illustrate the importance of changing how we perceive things and view things. I tell my students, and I usually do this towards the middle of the semester. I say we've learned how to regulate our emotions, and once again, you learned about that shark exercise that I gave you in the beginning of the semester. And so this is another imagined experience. So don't get stressed out when I ask you this question. It's imagined, and so if you're getting stressed out, what do you need to do? Stop imagining. So I ask my students, take a second and think about this. It's the end of the semester and you go and you check your grade for my class and maybe for some other classes that you're taking. And in my class, you get an F. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being that this is the most devastating thing that could happen in my life, and 1 being, I don't, it doesn't even bother me, it doesn't even faze me. Where would you scale yourself? Now, think about that for a second, and you can type it out. What do you think your students would respond? And I've done this exercise for many years, and I'll tell you what my students have responded. I get 10, 10, 10, 10. I've even had students that, 10's the highest that say 20. And what I do is then I turn around, and this is a CBT technique, a cognitive uh, behavioral therapy technique that we use a lot in therapy, but I mean, it can be applied to the classroom setting because it's really just helping them see things, a broad perspective of things. Sometimes we view things and we only see one thing in front of us, but we don't see the whole picture. But I ask my students, now, God forbid, and if this has happened, please come see me after. I want to make sure I connect you with a counselor so you have the support you need. But a loved one passes away. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how devastating is that? Now, once again, I'll go around the class 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. And here's what I tell my students. Here's what I'm hearing you say. My class is just as important as the life of your loved one. Can you bring back somebody who has passed away? Bring back your loved one. No. Can you retake my class and get potentially a better grade in my class? So those are things that it's really important. We can't expect our students to make the have those situations and make the best outcome in life if, one, they don't have access to that higher part of the brain, and that's why it's so important that we teach students how to self-regulate, to come back to the present moment and realize, "Oh, right now in this moment, I'm 100% safe." Yeah. It sucks that I didn't pass the class, but my life is not in danger. And it allows them then to get access to that part of the brain. Okay, so what I do to find a solution? Okay, well, I failed, sucks. Let me go ahead and retake this class instead of thinking, I hate this teacher. I'm gonna flat his tires, and he's gonna learn. I'm gonna and so forth and things that they do. Or I'm just quit. I mean, I guess I'm not college material. When we're in that emotional part of the brain, and many of our students do that, and then we'll come back to school. So you can see this is a life skill that they can take, an invaluable life skill that they can take to help your students become successful. Now, this is a really quick glimpse of what we teach in this curriculum, in these first year experience curriculum that we do here, for some of our students here at South Mountain Community College. In the curriculum, you have a lot of just knowledge base and skills that use applied neuroscience and cognitive psychology. And we wanted to do, when we developed the curriculum, we wanted to do what are the evidence-based approaches? What has been proven to create changes in our thinking patterns for our students? And just leave the fluff out, what sounds nice but has not been proven yet. And then we wanted to take a look at, now, how do we help our students accelerate their learning, improve focus, enhance cognitive functions? And so we've embedded even enhanced memory training to help students. In a matter of 5 minutes, in less than that, actually, in 2 minutes, we teach students how to memorize the first 10 elements of the periodic table, which is interesting because I tell students, you've probably taken chemistry and you've probably taken all these courses in high school, and now you're coming to college and you can't even remember, you can't even tell me what the first 10 elements of the periodic table are. Most instructors who are not in that field couldn't tell me, and they've taken those courses. And that's not your fault. It's because school, they're good at telling you what to learn, but they're poor at telling you how to learn that. And so we've embedded what we call meta learning, teaching you how to learn. How do you improve? How do you use the most effective memory skills to learn and retain that information, not just short term, but long term? And like I said earlier, we've embedded the principles of mindfulness, and that's a key element because even with mindfulness, memory involves focus. If you can't focus, you're not going to encode memory into short-term memory, and then consolidation into long-term memory is not going to happen. So the mindfulness practice is there not just to enhance well-being, but also to improve cognition, to improve memory. And then it goes all the way up to even to positive psychology because we've embedded what is in those of you that are very familiar with positive psychology and the work of Dr. Martin Seligman, know PERMA. And that's the element of positive psychology that's embedded into the academic setting. And how do we not just help our students thrive, but how do we help them remain, reach a point in their emotional life that they're happy and they're enjoying and they're finding purpose and meaning in life? So you can see these are a series of 6 elements that we train our students, ranging to what you just learned in, that inner balance of self-regulation. How do you manage your emotions? How do you gain access to the higher part of the brain? To mental flexibility. How do you start perceiving things from a different perspective so you can make choices that can help you become successful in life? To finding purpose and meaning in life. Because if you don't find purpose and a meaning, and that's really important for our students, because one of the first questions I ask in my first year experiences is, why are you here? And the response always is, because my advisor told me I had to take this class. So if they don't have purpose and meaning, they're not going to be enthusiastic of the class, which is going to result in poor ability to learn in your class. Positive psychology, how do they find even happiness within their life? And, and then meaningful relationships And when I say meaningful relationships, not just in their personal life, how do they develop and how do how they develop the skills to successfully communicate with their professors in a way that doesn't activate the nervous system of the professors. Well, Dr. So and so, I've taken this class with someone else, and they know how to teach. In this class, it's just boring. Well, it's they're not going to get because it may activate the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system of that professor, and they may be snarky back. So how do they have this healthy communication to get what they need? And not just with their professors, but with their advisors and with other people in their lives. And then purposeful self-care and revitalization. And that's your basic eat well, exercise, and sleep well. So that because if you don't do those things, it's hard for you to continue and persist in school.
We actually have a question
Yes.
of uh, for your previous slide of how do you do that when the emphasis is on the program curriculum? So how are you able to embed that into the program?
Into well, this is already embedded into a curriculum so it's taking some of the core principles of that the commonly seen across many universities, such as you know um, for example, growth and fixed mindset. So how do we then teach growth and fixed mindset using the principles of neuroscience and cognitive psychology? And so for the most part, what we do with growth and fixed mindset is that we educate. We tell students, here's a fixed mindset, here's a growth mindset. And we did that in the 80s in therapy. We just kind of in CBT, we just kind of educated in folks. Here's the best way to make choices. And what we've seen is poor outcomes. So how do we apply neuroscience? We know that, for example, to develop a fix and growth mindset, we need self-reflection. So before I even start teaching students growth and fixed mindset, I need to first teach students how to regulate their nervous system so they can have access to that part of the brain so they can self-reflect. Otherwise, um, I'm teaching them, and they'll repeat it back to you, but they're not putting it into application because they don't have access to that part of the brain that allows them to self-reflect and put it into practice. So it's using the principles, and it's built that way throughout the entire curriculum. And Tamara will talk about how do we then acquire the curriculum. How to throughout the entire curriculum is teaching them self-regulation, self-regulation. It's not just educating our students because that obviously will help those students that come into our classroom that it doesn't really matter if we teach them or not. So your honor students, they're going to be successful anyway because they have a lot of social support system within their family, maybe, or outside of their family, social support networks. They already have the ability to self-regulate. They can manage their emotions, but a lot of other students don't have that. So this is really focusing on those at-risk students that really are coming into. They should have learned these skills probably in elementary school. They should have probably learned it with their parents. Um, yeah, but their parents didn't learn it from nobody else. And the school system doesn't teach it in high school or in junior high. So now they're coming into the college system not learning these things, and we're reluctant to teach them these skills because they should have learned how to self-regulate emotionally before they come into my classroom. They're expected to act as college students, but that's not the reality. And so we have to take a step back and then teach them, but we're teaching them in a way that it's embedded into the entire curriculum, such as study skills, such as growth and fixed mindset. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question.
I think so. We have the response was profoundly said, putting it back in practice. And I will also add that Dr. Aubrey's books, his curriculum, can easily be embedded into your system as well. And because it contains many of those practices and the different pieces and exercises you can use in the classroom.
Correct. Thank you for that, Tamara. But in addition to that, and we're talking about because if we get to the nitty gritty, we're talking about how do we help our students persist and complete not just our course, but their school? How do they get to their degree completion? And one of the things that we've also embedded into this curriculum is micro certifications. And while there's value, and I'm not going to speak to the value of micro certifications because I'm probably speaking to the choir. Our students then pass a class, they get a micro certification, and then they can put that on their resume, and there's that value, right? That external value. My focus more is in the intrinsic value of micro certifications. And what I've experienced, and the reason why I continue having micro certifications embedded into my classrooms, is that students are more motivated to persist and complete within my classroom because they're working towards something. Yes, they're working towards an A, but it's more abstract. Um, Nowadays, when I grew up, it wasn't abstract. I mean, why are you here? Why are you motivated? Because I want to get an A. But nowadays, in their newer generations, they need something. They need something tangible, and to giving them a certificate that they can print out and they could put on their wall, not just put on their resume, and also and increase their ability to get hired in the market, job market. Those are all things, but for me, it's that intrinsic value of I'm more motivated because I want to increase my skill set. I want to become a, I want those professional credibility skills that are recognized in the industry. And then that enhances my self-esteem. And those are the reasons that I focus on embedding these micro certifications. And what we've seen here at the colleges that I've taught, we've seen an increase in persistence and completion within the classroom setting, not just based on the other curriculum that we've just discussed, but also these micro certifications. And so these are some of the micro certifications, and they're highlighted and I believe that's orange, right, Tamara?
Yeah,
Unless I'm
correct.
colorblind.
Yeah, the ones in orange are the ones that I believe are related to the science of college success, correct?
Correct. And the other ones, there are other textbooks that have those other industry certifications, particularly for those of you teaching psychology or teaching social work degree programs or behavioral health degree programs, or even some of your healthcare programs. Some of those other ones are embedded into some of the other curriculum. So with that, we have, about, what is it, about a couple of 5, 6 minutes. Tamara's going to
Yeah,
go
well,
ahead and hand it over. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them.
yeah. We had a question of it doesn't asking if it doesn't have to be based out of co-curricular. It doesn't have to be based out. Is that for question for the certain micro certification piece, micro certificates? Co-curricular records. Okay. Micro credentials. Okay. So for the micro credentials, whether it's based out of co-curricular.
So, and I let me go ahead and take a step back. So what I've done with the micro certifications is we've reached out to some of these governing bodies that manage these micro certifications, and they have their own curriculum. And what I've done is, and that's something anybody can do, is the textbook, when I wrote that, I wrote it to meet the competencies that are required for those certifications. And as a result, I've partnered with those organizations, and anyone that adopts these textbooks within the classroom will get through human resources the final exam that you could use within the classroom. And students who pass that class then fill out a form that they submit to this organization that then certify that student if they pass the final exam with 80% or more.
Okay,
I hope
thank you.
that answers that question.
Great. Are there, if anybody else has any questions, she says that's fantastic. And thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. Thanks again, Dr. Aubrey, for sharing your expertise. Always appreciated. And I hope you have a great day.